It is 1980. A pathologist named Jürgen Ludwig is sitting in the Mayo Clinic looking at liver biopsies from 20 patients. He is looking at severe inflammation, fat accumulation, and tissue scarring, the kind of damage that, in 1980, medicine had only ever seen in people who drank heavily, the kind of damage that had a name, alcoholic liver disease. But none of these 20 patients drank, not one of them. And Ludwig is staring at their biopsies thinking about how medicine is about to have to accept something it has never formally accepted before, that a liver could become severely damaged through a completely different mechanism, not alcohol, metabolism, the eating pattern, the hormonal environment created by what people ate and how often they ate it. Ludwig published his findings in the Mayo Clinic proceedings and coined a new term for what he had found: non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, the first time medicine formally named the condition of a liver damaged not by drinking, but by the metabolic consequence of eating. 45 years later, the condition Ludwig named affects between 1 in 4 and 1 in 3 adults worldwide. Most of them have never been told, most of them have no symptoms, and most of the content that covers this topic has never explained what is actually happening inside the liver during the hours of a fast with the molecular precision that this organ's biology deserves. This script does exactly that. Here is the number that should stop you before the mechanism begins. A 2024 systematic review of global prevalence data estimated that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease affects approximately 25 to 30% of the global adult population. In Western countries, the figure reaches up to 35%. That means that right now, statistically, between 1 in 4 and 1 in 3 people watching this video have more fat stored in their liver than the 5% threshold that hepatologists define as the upper limit of healthy liver fat content. And the most important clinical fact about this condition is that the liver can carry 2, 3, or 4 times the healthy threshold of fat without producing a single symptom that the person can feel. No pain. No fatigue beyond what life already produces, no early warning that the silent progression described in Ludwig's 1980 paper is already underway. Here is why fatty liver is silent in its early stages and why that silence ends when it does. This is the mechanism the competitor's script does not explain. Hepatocytes, the primary functional cells of the liver, accumulate fat through a process called steatosis. Fat droplets, triglycerides packaged in lipid droplet structures, accumulate inside the hepatocyte cytoplasm. The hepatocyte with 10% intracellular fat and the hepatocyte with 30% intracellular fat function at reduced efficiency, but they do not produce the inflammatory signal that creates symptoms. The silence persists because the inflammatory cascade has not yet been triggered. The trigger is specific. When fat accumulation reaches the point where cholesterol crystals begin forming inside the lipid droplets, those crystals act as damage-associated molecular patterns that activate the NLRP3 inflammasome in the Kupffer cells, the resident immune macrophages of the liver. NLRP3 activation produces interleukin-1 beta and interleukin-18. The cytokine flood begins. Hepatic stellate cells activate and begin depositing collagen. The silent steatosis crosses the threshold into steatohepatitis, the inflamed condition that Ludwig first named. And the person who felt completely fine on Monday is now on the trajectory toward the fibrosis and cirrhosis that Friday's biopsy has begun showing. Think of the liver as a warehouse. Fatty liver is a warehouse with stockpiling in the aisles. The warehouse still operates. Goods still move in and out. The workers navigate around the excess stock. Nobody outside the warehouse knows the aisles are full because the deliveries and dispatches continue at an acceptable rate. But when the piled stock reaches the ceiling and begins blocking the fire exits, the warehouse triggers its alarm system. The NLRP3 alarm fires. The emergency response team arrives, Kupffer cells releasing inflammatory cytokines. The warehouse that was full but functional becomes a warehouse in crisis. And the crisis, once it starts, is far harder to resolve than the overcrowded aisle stage that preceded it. Intermittent fasting intervenes before the alarm fires. Here is how, hour by hour. Hours 0 to 4, the last meal is processed. The problem is created. When you eat a meal containing carbohydrate, glucose enters your bloodstream. Insulin rises. Insulin sends a specific molecular instruction to the liver: take this glucose from the blood and convert it to glycogen for short-term storage. Your liver holds approximately 100 grams of glycogen, roughly 400 calories of rapidly accessible fuel. While insulin is elevated, hormone-sensitive lipase in your adipose tissue is suppressed. Fat stays locked in the storage cells. Fat stays locked in the liver. No fat leaves. The warehouse receives more deliveries and nothing is dispatched. Under normal conditions, this is exactly correct. The problem begins when the next meal arrives before the previous delivery has been processed. In the modern continuous eating pattern, breakfast at 7, a snack at 10, lunch at 1, a snack at 4, dinner at 7, a late snack at 9 or 10. Insulin is elevated for the majority of the waking day. Fat is locked in storage for the majority of the waking day. The liver never receives the signal to dispatch the accumulated stock, and after months and years of this pattern, the stock builds toward the threshold that activates the NLRP3 alarm. Hours 4 to 12, the insulin falls, the seesaw tips. Insulin and glucagon operate like opposite ends of a seesaw. When insulin rises after eating, glucagon falls. When insulin falls during fasting, glucagon rises. Glucagon sends the opposite instruction to insulin: not store energy, release it. The liver begins breaking down its glycogen stores through glycogenesis, releasing glucose into the bloodstream to maintain the brain's continuous fuel supply. If you are not exercising heavily, the liver's glycogen supply provides approximately 8 to 12 hours of stable blood glucose. By hour 8 to 10 of fasting, the glycogen is substantially depleted. This is the phase most people who eat continuously never experience. Their glycogen is refilled before it depletes. The seesaw never tips far enough for glucagon to activate the fat release pathway. The warehouse never gets a dispatch order. And then the next delivery arrives. At hours 12 to 18, something remarkable begins. Insulin has now fallen to its genuine daily minimum, not the partial low between smaller meals, the genuine minimum that requires approximately 12 continuous hours without food to reach. At this level, hormone-sensitive lipase in adipose tissue is fully activated. Fat cells begin releasing their stored fatty acids into the bloodstream. Those fatty acids travel to the liver where they enter the mitochondria through carnitine palmitoyl transferase and are converted to acetyl-CoA, then to the ketone bodies beta-hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate. The metabolic switch described by researchers at the National Institute on Aging has been thrown. The liver has shifted from glucose burning to fat burning. And critically, the fat it is burning includes the fat stored inside its own hepatocytes. The warehouse has finally received its dispatch order. Think of this as the moment the warehouse manager opens the inventory management system for the first time in months. The loading docks are clear. The fat that arrived during the continuous eating period and accumulated in the aisles begins moving toward the exit. Hours 12 to 18, autophagy and lipophagy activate. The warehouse is not just dispatching stock, it is clearing the damaged inventory. Between hours 12 and 18 of fasting, the mTOR suppression from the fasting state and the AMPK activation from falling cellular energy levels drive the autophagic program to a depth that the partial fasting between meals in a continuous eating pattern never reaches. Think of autophagy as the maintenance crew the warehouse sends in when the production line stops. During the continuous eating pattern, the production line never stops, and the maintenance crew never gets access. The broken equipment accumulates in the machinery room, damaged and inefficient, but not yet replaced. When fasting stops the production line, the maintenance crew enters and begins systematically removing every piece of broken equipment. Damaged proteins are dismantled and their components recycled. Dysfunctional mitochondria are cleared and replaced with new ones. The warehouse machinery that was running at reduced efficiency begins returning to optimal function. In liver cells specifically, a specialized form of autophagy called lipophagy operates on the fat droplets that have been accumulating in the hepatocyte cytoplasm. Lipophagy wraps individual fat droplets in autophagic membranes, delivers them to lysosomes, and converts the stored triglycerides back into free fatty acids that the mitochondria can then burn as fuel. This is the specific mechanism by which intermittent fasting removes fat from inside liver cells. Not through a supplement, not through a detox protocol, through a biological process that has been built into the hepatocyte since before the liver had a disease named after it. A randomized controlled trial published in April 2025 by Ozlu Karahan and colleagues at Marmara University measured the effect of 16-8 intermittent fasting on patients with confirmed metabolic dysfunction-associated fatty liver disease using FibroScan transient elastography, the gold standard clinical tool for measuring liver fat content without biopsy. The 16-8 group showed significant reductions in the controlled attenuation parameter, the FibroScan measure of hepatic steatosis, alongside significantly elevated serum Beclin-1 and ATG5, the two primary measurable markers of autophagic activity in liver tissue. The fast was not just reducing liver fat, it was confirming the autophagy mechanism through which it was doing so, with direct biomarker evidence. A 2024 systematic review of 12 randomized controlled trials on fasting protocols and NAFLD confirmed significant reductions in hepatic steatosis, improvements in insulin sensitivity, and decreases in inflammatory markers across multiple fasting protocols, including time-restricted feeding and alternate day fasting. The evidence base has moved from mechanistic research to clinical trial confirmation. Hours 18 to 24, the liver begins repairing what the previous months built. Beyond 18 hours, the autophagic program is running at maximum depth. ALT and AST, the liver enzymes that leak into the bloodstream when hepatocytes are stressed or damaged, begin falling with consistent intermittent fasting practice across weeks. These enzymes are the blood markers your doctor checks when they suspect liver inflammation. Elevated ALT and AST mean hepatocytes are under inflammatory stress and releasing their contents. Falling ALT and AST mean the inflammatory environment inside the liver is calming. The hepatocytes are under less stress. They are leaking fewer distress signals. The 2024 systematic review confirmed significant reductions in ALT and AST across multiple fasting intervention trials in NAFLD patients. The Marmara University April 2025 RCT on 16-8 IF and MAFLD with FibroScan confirmation and autophagy biomarkers confirmed that the 16-8 fasting group showed significant reductions in liver enzyme markers, alongside the FibroScan confirmed steatosis reduction. The liver that was in the early stages of Ludwig's 1980 progression is, with consistent application across weeks, beginning to reverse it. And here is the biological fact about the liver that makes this reversal possible in a way that would be impossible for almost any other organ. The liver is the only internal organ in the human body with the capacity for complete regeneration. Surgeons can remove up to 75% of a healthy liver, and the remaining portion will regenerate to approximately its original size within weeks to months. During intermittent fasting, this regenerative capacity is activated by the combination of reduced inflammatory load, activated autophagy clearing the damaged hepatocytes, lowered insulin reducing the de novo lipogenesis that was continuously refilling the warehouse, and the improved metabolic environment that the fat oxidation program creates for the hepatocytes that replace the damaged ones. Here is what you will notice in weeks rather than months. In the first 2 weeks of consistent daily intermittent fasting, most people notice that the afternoon energy crash, the 2 to 3 p.m. cognitive dip that follows the post-lunch insulin spike, begins fading. This is not simply an absence of a spike, it is the beginning of the metabolic flexibility that a liver running its fat oxidation program during the fasting window provides. The brain begins receiving a steadier fuel supply as ketone production replaces the glucose dependency that the continuous eating pattern enforced. In weeks 3 and 4, the circumference of the upper abdomen begins reducing in most people, not from subcutaneous fat loss alone, from the liver itself beginning to contract as the intrahepatic fat decreases. A fatty liver is an enlarged liver. It sits lower in the abdomen than a healthy liver. As fat departs through the lipophagy mechanism, the liver returns toward its healthy volume, and the upper abdominal fullness that accompanies hepatomegaly begins to resolve. In the 4 to 12-week range, where the systematic review and the clinical trial evidence is most consistent, blood enzyme markers begin reflecting the biological changes that the fasting window has been producing internally. ALT and AST fall. Fasting insulin and HOMIR improve. Triglycerides, which the liver was manufacturing from the continuous carbohydrate delivery of the continuous eating pattern through the SREBP1C de novo lipogenesis pathway described in the cholesterol and triglyceride scripts on this channel, begin declining as the fasting window reduces the duration of the hepatic manufacturing program each day. The honest framing. The April 2025 Marmara University RCT on 16-8 IF and MAFLD with FibroScan confirmation and autophagy biomarkers is published and peer-reviewed. The 2024 systematic review of 12 RCTs on fasting and NAFLD is published. The NLPR3 inflammasome mechanism in Kupffer cells and hepatic steatosis progression is established across multiple published studies, including Science Direct and Frontiers in Cell and Developmental Biology. The Ludwig 1980 Mayo Clinic Proceedings paper is published. The lipophagy mechanism for intrahepatic fat removal is established in the autophagy literature.
The honest caveat is this. Intermittent fasting produces clinically meaningful reductions in hepatic steatosis as part of an overall metabolic improvement that includes the reduction of de novo lipogenesis from reduced insulin exposure. It does not produce these benefits independently of what is eaten during the eating window. Breaking the fast with refined carbohydrates, fructose, or ultra-processed foods that reactivate the SREBP-1C lipogenesis program immediately upon eating partially reverses the hepatic fat reduction that the fasting window produced. The Don't Ruin Your Fast script on this channel covers the specific refeeding biology in full detail. Intermittent fasting is not appropriate for people with established cirrhosis or advanced liver fibrosis without hepatologist supervision, people with eating disorder history, pregnant or breastfeeding women, or people with type 1 diabetes or insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes without physician oversight. Here is the complete picture. Intermittent fasting intervenes at every stage of the progression that Jürgen Ludwig first described in 1980. The fasting window reduces insulin to its genuine daily minimum, stopping the continuous fat delivery that fills the hepatocyte warehouse. The fat oxidation switch activates hormone-sensitive lipase in adipose tissue, dispatching the accumulated stock. Lipophagy wraps the intrahepatic fat droplets and delivers them to lysosomes, where they are converted back to fuel. Autophagy clears the damaged hepatocytes and dysfunctional mitochondria that the inflammatory environment was producing. ALT and AST fall as the inflammatory stress inside the liver resolves. The FibroScan steatosis measurement begins moving in the right direction. In 1980, Ludwig named a disease that medicine had never formally recognized. The disease he named was the metabolic consequence of a liver that was never given the conditions to run its own maintenance program. The conditions that reverse it are not pharmaceutical. They are chronological. They are the fasting window. They are the hours that the liver has been waiting for. Drop a comment right now. Did you know that fatty liver disease affects 1 in 4 adults and produces no symptoms in its early stages? And has this video changed how you think about what the hours of your fast are doing inside your liver specifically? I read every single one. If this permanently changed how you think about what intermittent fasting is doing to your liver at the molecular level, hit subscribe. Every week on the Rewired, we decode the mechanisms behind the habits that determine your health, your brain, and how you age. New mechanism every week. Ludwig named the disease in 1980. The mechanism that reverses it has been built into the liver since long before that. You just needed the fasting window to let it run.